Okay, welcome to our book club reading of Wuthering Heights, chapters 5 and 6. As promised, I brought my bird this time. He is a Coturnix quail. His name is Alfred Lord Tennyson, and I call him Alfie or Alfredo. So he will be joining me for our analysis of chapters 5 and 6. So something I noticed in these chapters is that we're beginning to see the introduction of the idea of nature versus nurture, with Heathcliff representing nurture and Cathy representing nature. As I mentioned before, we don't really know much about Heathcliff's upraising except for the fact that when Mr. Earnshaw found him, he had been a homeless little boy. But something that Mrs. Dean says in chapter 5 is that everything that's happening to Heathcliff was rich nourishment to the child's pride and black tempers. This is then contrasted with Cathy, who is someone who grew up in comfort, and she has been inherently cruel for the entire time that we've known her so far. So I'm wondering if there's going to be perhaps an interesting discourse about inherent versus inherited cruelty. Mrs. Dean talks about how Cathy delighted in being naughty and upsetting everyone, and that she loved being around Heathcliff, but also likes the power that she has over Heathcliff. And this bond is then cemented even more, this bond between Cathy and Heathcliff, when at the end of chapter 5, Mr. Earnshaw dies. And when Mrs. Dean finds them, they're sitting together, Heathcliff and Cathy, they're sitting together, and in a way they're trauma bonding over his death. So now we as the reader kind of know that they're going to be inseparable from here on out. Chapter 6 then deals with Mr. Earnshaw's funeral. Hindley returns. He is now married to a woman who seems to be really sweet, but also really full of anxiety. And Heathcliff, again, is getting the short end of the stick with Mr. Earnshaw. He always treated him with such kindness, but Cathy made sure that her power over Heathcliff was greater than her father's kindness over him, which, that's crazy. But Henley, he has returned with a vengeance to wreak havoc on Heathcliff. And so again, we have this idea of nurture kind of crafting its cruelty in Heathcliff. That perhaps, unlike Cathy, who was born with this cruelty, Heathcliff may have to adorn it like a second skin. And something Heathcliff said in chapter 6 really gave me pause, because he is now telling the story of why Cathy is with the Lintons, and he is, oh my goodness, Alfredo. But anyway, he's also